and amplify them, as well as input sources, some input sources that you can use from TOA, and of course a few speaker options. Now, in general, as an introduction to background music, the idea behind it is that it creates an ambience for your environment that is pleasing to your clientele. So ideally, it'll enhance the shopping experience and stimulate your sales because people are going to be feeling comfortable about being in your location, and they may just want to hang out a little bit longer and buy a little bit more. It helps you match your brand identity with the proper music style and the proper programming. So if you've been walking through a mall and you've heard the music pouring out of certain stores, there's a very good reason they're doing that, and that is, of course, to brand themselves with a certain identity for the clientele that they are servicing. And of course, with background music systems, one of the other requirements or jobs that they can fulfill is that you can broadcast information over them, whether you need to make an announcement, whether you want to put in some advertisements into the system, or for emergency paging and that sort of application as well. Background systems are just about everywhere. There are vast applications for background music systems. Ideally, you might see them in retail locations or supermarkets for easy operations for multi-zone use. You might have, say, a zone with the sales floor, a warehouse, the offices, maybe the outside parking lot's a different zone as well. Also ideal for restaurant lounges. So if you've got a multi-purpose type restaurant that has various different rooms in it, so you've got a restaurant room, maybe you've got a separate lounge or sports area, separate meeting rooms, patios, those can all be separate zones. Ideal for hotels as well. Of course, we've all heard the background music in hotel lobbies and restaurants. Similar ideas with multi-zoning on those applications. And of course, if you need to put a mic into the system, you can do that as well. Great for conference centers in the main areas, which isn't in the specifically in the rooms, or of course you can put background music into the conference rooms themselves for between uses or between events. You can, of course, in a good background music or a proper background music system, you should have the ease of selection for your audio-visual inputs, your mics, your background music sources, etc. You can also use them in commercial offices. A lot of commercial offices now are having background music throughout the reception area, the open working areas, even in the closest closed offices and in the cafeteria, of course, all great places to have some background music in operation. We'll start with the BG2240D, which is actually an expansion on our BG2000 series mixer amplifiers. It's identical, basically, to the previous units in the line, but what we've done with this one is we've doubled the power output from the largest previous version, which was the BG2120D, and we've converted it now to a Class D amplifier, so it's a little bit more, well, considerably more heat and power efficient than the previous models, and it's half the weight of the previous ones as well, so you're not incurring quite such a shipping cost, and you're not having quite such a heavy amplifier that you have to install in your rack. So things are a little bit better in terms of the new amp coming down that line. It's ideal for simpler installations requiring one or maybe two input or output zones rather. The BG2000 series is a perfect economic solution for small stores and eateries, things of that nature where there isn't necessarily a DSP required. It's a compact five-channel mixer amp designed for paging, music distribution, and music or messaging on hold. It does allow phantom power on the mic inputs, so you do have that option. On the unit itself, it's got 3 line inputs, with line 1 being line or mic switchable, while line and 2 are equipped with RCA pin jacks as well as terminal connectors. And then you've got the expansion module slot for the 900 series module that allows you to do more custom configurations for the other 2 inputs. It comprises a 2-channel broadcast system with capability is when it's together with the Zone 2 expansion. You can use that with a BA200 series when you need to expand and add that second zone into the series. Any of the 5 inputs are assignable to the music on hold or Zone 2 output for the BG2000 to fulfill whatever your actual background music system requirements are for the space. And you do have front panel, bass, and treble controls, which are recessed to protect their settings so you don't have little fingers getting in there. to mess with your EQ settings and cause you problems, and have maybe to come back and do a troubleshooting call or a service call to just fix some settings that someone may have messed up. One thing you're going to hear throughout today is keeping it simple for the end user. That is really the main target, the main goal of what we're trying to accomplish with most of our background music systems, and particularly the three new ones, is keeping it easy for the end user and reducing the amount of overall service calls that you end up having to come out and deal with if settings get changed. On the BG2240, back to that as well, there is auto or manual mute function, which is adjustable on the back of the unit as well. And we can have a quick look at the back of the unit here. We'll change the page. There we go. So looking at the back of the unit, as you can see, you've got your 900 module slot over here for input expansion. Right here. You have your mic input here. You've got manual muting coming in on contact closure, mute sense here. You have your diff switches that can control what line one is doing, and then you go into your level selection. So then you've got those options on your input on your diff switches as well, and you have your lines 1 or 2 and 3 inputs, which are there all on RCA or as terminal connections as well. Having a look down here, this is the connection for your remote volume control. You have line output there to go into maybe into a recording system or into another amplifier. You have your music on hold output, which can go into your phone system or into be your zone 2 for another amplifier. And of course, your main speaker outputs and your dip switch settings for the module. Just a very brief little line drawing here to give you a general idea of how the BG series sets up. I left these kind of general because there could be any number of different sources that you might use. But for instance, on the BG2240, what you might have is a microphone input. You may have a telephone input. You may have your just general background music source. And then this one is unpopulated with the 900. So then you've got still 2 more inputs that you can use through the 900 module that you can expand based on what you actually need for your venue. And of course, it shows the remote volume control here as well. And of course, your speaker outputs. Next up is the A5000 series. We have the A5006 and the A5012. They are 2 different wattages, 60 or 120 watt output into a single zone. These are ideal for restaurants, coffee shops, retail shops, things of that nature. Anything really a smaller background music type scenario, although you can do quite a large number of speakers with one of these. If you need to, you can go up to 120 watts. So they are fairly sizable, but they are single zone output. They're 1U half rack compact size. Very simple for setup. There's not too much for hardware settings. In fact, on the front panel, you don't even see a master volume control. That is to keep it simple, like I said, for the end user. All they have here for the end user control is your line level controls, but no master there for them to perhaps get confused by in the long term. As I mentioned, 60 or 120 watt models, both in high and low Z speaker connections. So you've got 70 volt, 100 volt, and 4 ohm operation on this. There are 2 mic line inputs on terminal connectors on the back of this, as well as 2 line inputs on RCA. The intuitive graphic user interface software allows for sound optimization. You have a 5-band parametric EQ for each input and on the output. You've got the option for remote master volume control. So if you want to have a 10K plot on the wall, you can do that with this for master control. You do have mute function as well on mic line 1 over the rest of the inputs. Currently it's a manual mute, but in the future we may see that, we should see that change to auto muting based on sensitivity. And there is a compressor on each of lines input 1 and 2 so that you can make sure that no matter what your input source is, you're getting a nice even level throughout the day. So say, for instance, if you're using an MP3 player, which of course are notorious for various different levels, song by song, then what you can do is you can compress those so that they don't vary so much in volume throughout the day, and you don't have someone turn down the volume on a loud song and then forget to turn it back up for the rest of the day, and then suddenly you've got no more background music, and that would be no good for anybody. A couple of new features that are coming out shortly for this, with a new firmware that should be coming down the pipe just about any time. We're expecting it very, very soon. We'll see the new features of 10-band selectable DSP filters on the outputs. We will have the ability for 15 selectable TOA speaker EQ presets, so whatever TOA speaker you're using, there will be a preset built in for that, so that you don't have to go in and mess with the EQs yourself. You'll be able to set those based on whatever speaker you're actually using. We'll also be incorporating feedback suppression for channels for inputs 1 and 2. This will obviously allow you to have a little bit more flexibility in your installation and a little less susceptible to feedback and noise in the system. There will also be the auto mute will also now be adjustable with mute sensitivity. So instead of relying on a contact closure to sense the mute, you'll actually be able to have auto sense on that, so that it'll actually detect the signal coming in. Quick look at the front and rear panels of the A5000. Like I mentioned, you've got your 4 input volume controls here, but no master per se. You've got signal and peak and protection lamps there, but no master right on the front of the unit. Like I said, to keep that simple for the end user, though you can, through this connection on line 2, on the contact closure there, you can use a remote master on a 10K plot, just that's hanging out on the wall. As you can see on mic line 1, that has the 5 connections there on terminal connector. So you've got your actual line connection and your contact closure for the mute function. You have a USB port here that is currently unused. That'll be, we expect, for firmware updates, things of that nature. You've got your LAN port, which allows you to do all your programming. So the software for the A5000 is actually free on our website, and you can download that at any time to play with it. But basically, this will interface either directly ad hoc to the computer through Cat5 or Cat6, or you can run it through a network for remote control use. And of course, you've got your speaker outs over there on the left for 100 volt, 70 volt, or 4 ohm usage. A quick look at a basic line drawing for the A5000 series. Again, I've kept it kind of general just because you could go in with just about any source on most of the inputs here. But for instance, like line 1 would be whatever you're wanting to put on for a priority source. So if you've got a paging source, maybe a microphone there that you want to override the system on, that would be appropriate for that. Line 2 might be your main music source, so that you can do compression on that, and then you've got still priority on like line 1, so that you can do your paging in over top of the music coming in on line 2. Would of course connect via the network to your graphic user interface, and you have the option again shown here for the 10K pot, and then your output to your speakers. The MA-725 is kind of the big brother here. It's a slightly different series that we've introduced as well, and this has just started shipping here within the last couple of weeks. So these are all brand new products, but this is the newest of them. It's also the biggest, and it is the most kind of all-in-one of the 3. So this is your all-in-one multi-channel solution for multi-zone applications, absolutely. And it's ideal for general emergency announcement and background music for hotels, restaurants, pubs, retail locations, offices, things of that nature. But these would be for your bigger locations that require maybe more zones or more power. Excuse me. On the back of it, you have 4 summing stereo line inputs with matrix routing to any of the 4 amplifiers' outputs. You have each line level input has a level adjustment and a sign restriction setting, so that you can determine which outputs you actually want the end user to be able to send this to. So any given input can be restricted as to which output it's actually going to, so that if there's an input on there you don't want the end user actually accessing from a certain zone, you can restrict that. There's also two mic line priority inputs on the back of the unit with different priority levels for paging and other pre-recorded sources, which can override the selected input channel for the assigned output. And what these will allow you to do is take away a little bit of control from the end user in terms of the priority settings on those mic and line inputs, because they're strictly on the back. The end user does not actually have control over those. They're done by the installer, and then the installer walks away, and those priority settings are in without any necessary adjustment anywhere else in the system, unless the actual system itself is going to change and the application that it's being used in is going to change. Each priority input also has input level, mute sensitivity, and mute hold time adjustments. There are selectable DSP presets, which can be selected through the back, including general EQs, loudness curves, TOA speaker EQ presets, and crossover settings if you wanted to use this with a subwoofer. Now, there is a DSP built into this, but it does not have a graphic user interface, so you don't have to plug it into a computer. It's all done from dip switches and knobs on the back of the unit to keep it simple for the end user. Each output channel is equipped with a 250-watt Class D amplifier at either 70-volt or 100-volt output. The idea there being is that you're going into a general commercial application type speaker system. So this is strictly a high impedance amplifier that's on this, and that will limit the requirements or the options in terms of output when it comes to going into those systems. Of course, we do have other options that we can work with that we'll discuss momentarily for lower impedance type systems. Each output channel also has an auxiliary line out to deliver audio to other systems or to expand the system if you need to. So what you can do with that is if you do need to go into another zone, you need maybe to have a fifth zone with another external amplifier, you can take a line level output from any of the 4 zones that are existing on the MA-725 and put them into an additional amplifier for zone expansion. As I mentioned, no PC programming or network connection required for setup at the site, and the network connection is actually there for maintenance purposes only on the back of this unit. There is an optional wall mount control unit, which we'll show you in a second. The WP700 connects via straight Cat5 or Cat6 cable to control the line input selection and output control, volume control of each output. The amps in here are Class D again, and they have various protection features against overcurrent, high temperature, and short circuit of speaker lines to protect against these things, so that you can't blow up the system. Just with basic little problems that should be easily remedied. So those protection features are there. And as I mentioned, there is another option that you can do with this system if you need to go into a lower impedance system or a different type of amplification, and that is the MA-725F, which we will show you on the next page. Now, before I carry on, I want to mention all of these things do have their own webinars in the past. So if you need a more in-depth look at the specifications of any of the things that I'm talking about today, you can, of course, look online for the spec sheets on the web pages for those specific pieces, or you can look up previous webinars that have been done that are perhaps a little bit more in-depth, as these are really just more of an overview of products that you would put together into these systems. So having a look at the MA-700F, which is the non-amplified brother to the MA-725F. Basically, this is the same exact unit, but it doesn't have amplification in it. So you have line level input only for different power applications. As well, you do have the same matrix and DSP as the MA-725, but without the amplifiers. It's a great option for the customers who need more amplification, or they need to go into a low Z system. They've got some 8-ohm speakers or for HX5s or HX7s or things of that nature. Maybe they don't have 70 volt that they're going into. and they need to work with a lower impedance system, then it'll work fine just for that. Or if you need to only go into a 2-channel system, save some money by not having as many amplifiers, we can do that. And this gives you the ability for various power zones as well. So if you've got one zone that's 70 volts and one zone that's low impedance or requires a whole bunch of power, then you can run through other amplifiers just using the mixer version. Having a quick look at the front here, as you can see, they look basically identical to each other. We have the on top there is the MA-725. Now that shows you the 4 input selections and the volume control for each zone. Now that's all the end user actually gets for control, so they can't get in there and mess around with settings if they don't really need to. So they're not likely. Most people aren't going to get into the back of the rack and change a bunch of settings thinking that they know everything there is to know about the system that you've installed. So what we've given is just 4 inputs of selection and a volume control for each zone. And as you can see, both the MA-725 and the MM-700 look very, very similar to each other. Really, the only main difference on the front of these units is on the amplified version, the protect light that lives there on the front panel. Quick look at the MA-725, the backside of it, just looking at some of the connections on here. As you can see, you got your priority mic line inputs here, which are selectable as to whether they are mic line level, or mic or line level, I should say. They do have manual mute function on the connection, but there is also auto muting, mute sense built in if you wanted to use the mute sensitivity rather than triggering from a contact closure to do your muting. You can also, of course, adjust hold times on the priority. So if it's ducked down, you can say how far it's going to duck and how long it's going to hold for. You also have down here, we've got our line inputs on our CAs for each of the zones, which are of course selectable to send to each or any of the 4 zones. Then over here we have our high pass and low pass filters. And with the EQ settings, which are for presets, for the any TOA speaker you might want to put in there. So it will have those EQ presets built in, and it's just a matter of engaging the right setting for the speaker you're actually using in your application. And as you see, then we have the remote control functionality over here, and we have the option of controlling or plugging in with Cat5 directly to the remote control unit, the WP700, which I'll show you momentarily, and then the LAN port, which is currently just used for maintenance. Looking at the WP700 wall controller, this is a very simple single-gang wall controller unit that just duplicates what's on the front of the amplifier for each zone. So as you can see, it has 4 inputs of input selection and a volume control, just exactly like what you had on the front of the amplifier. And this plugs in via Cat5 to the specific zone it's controlling, and when it does, as you see on the bottom line here, it defeats the front panel operation for the amplifier itself. So you can't control it from 2 different locations at once. Again, the ultimate goal there is to keep it simple for the end user. You don't want to have maybe somebody controlling, doing settings on the amplifier in the amp room, and then somebody else, perhaps in the zone itself, trying to change inputs and volumes from the controller, and each of them confuses the other. This way, we'll keep things a little bit simpler and make sure that you don't have too many control options to confuse the issue. Brief quick look at the line drawing for the MA-720F and how you might wire this up. In this case, you might have 2 priority mic line settings. So say maybe one might be a paging mic, the other might be a paging mic for different zones, or you might have a paging mic and a message repeater on here, or just 2 message repeaters. You basically have your heart's content as to how you want to configure that, and then any of 4 background music sources. So say, for instance, this might be in a restaurant that's multi-zone application. Maybe they've got a background music source for the restaurant itself. Maybe they've got some TV sources for sports in the lounge, or maybe they have things like network adapters to bring audio in from another source something of that nature, or of course a message repeater could work there as well. So lots of different options for ways you can make that work. And then of course each zone can have its own volume control, and of course you've got 4 separate speaker outputs, each at 250 watts per output, in order to service your requirement as needed. And don't forget, now that we've had a look at the main 3 mixer amplifiers that we've been concentrating on for today's webinar, which were of course the A5000, the MA-725, and the BG2240D. Don't forget that those are not the only ways to skin a cat. We do still have plenty of other mixers and amplifiers that you can use based on the requirements of your installation to make sure that you get the optimum background music system that you actually require for your setup. So for instance, the MA or the M9000 M2 has been around for ages, and it can go up to 8x8. So if you need to do a full matrix system, you can certainly do that with the M9000. And you can look at the A700 series and the 900 series for perhaps you need something that doesn't have the digital signal processing built into it, but you need some more inputs than, say, maybe a BG amplifier might allow you. So then you could go into an A700 or a 900 series amplifier with that. And of course, there's the M633D and the M864D on the other side. Those are straight mixers, more higher-end digital mixers that you might use in a specific application for background music scenarios. Typically, though, you would see those more in the nature of school stages and things of that nature. And then, of course, the DA series amplifier. So any mixer that you might have could send its source in through a DA series amplifier, which it can be either 2 or 4 channel and various power outputs based on what your requirement might actually be for your venue as required. Okay, so that pretty much tears it for the processing, the mixing, and amplification side of things. So we'll have a look now at some input sources that you might use to maintain your system as a TOA system from start to finish if possible. Because I always like to say that it's good, it's always best if you can, to build a system that is consistent from start to finish with a single manufacturer if possible. I've always been a proponent of keeping things straight throughout the system based on who the manufacturer is, and keeping things consistent. So starting here with the PM660U paging microphone. It's a very handy paging microphone, and it can do the contact closures to allow you to do the priority ducking on these inputs that require the contact closure to do that. And it's just a matter of pushing the big orange button on there to engage the microphone and get that signal into the system. It does have anti-vibration construction, and it's a balanced output to render the microphone resistive to external noises that aren't actually part of the announcements. We'll be looking quickly at some of these inputs. Again, they do appear on our website with more detail, but I'm just going to quickly have a look at each one, not necessarily read through every single single specification of each and every piece, just for the sake of time. So now we're at the DT930. This is our AM/FM tuner. Typical use for your background, your back rooms, your offices, warehouses, and anywhere where you might want an AM/FM radio rather than an internet connection, or if you don't have an internet connection available for streaming, the AM/FM radio is going to help you to do those things. It does have a stereo output available, even though in most background music type applications, you're more likely to come out in a mono input to distribute into your system. But it does have stereo output available for that requirement. And it does come with an FM dipole antenna as well as an AM loop antenna, and you can get a rack kit for it, which is just our MB15B rack mount kit for 19-inch rack mounting. Next is our EV20R sound repeater. Now this is very handy if you wanted to build in advertising to your background music scenario, or if there was an emergency announcement that you wanted to put in as a regular message in here for triggering via contact closure, you can do that as well. So it's ideal for anywhere that recorded messages or sounds would have to be played into the PA for either in-store advertising or for emergency announcements. You can have up to 4 separate messages in the EV20R, and those can be announcements or tones or messages, advertisements, etc. And you've got up to 6 minutes of audio that you can use to split between those messages or those sounds. So you've got quite a bit of time there that you can use. So anywhere, any combination of those 4 messages can comprise that 6 minutes of audio that lives inside the repeater. It does have front panel mounted recording inputs, which keep the process simple when it comes to programming in your new messages. There is a built-in interval timer on it, anywhere from 0 seconds right up to over an hour. You've got a 3-watt amplifier built into this as well. If you need to do connected speakers directly from the unit, you can do that in a small system. And there is a line level input as well as the output for including other external sources such as a CD player or a dedicated background music unit. Now, if you do want to do real scheduling and you're not just working on doing sound repeating based on, like I said, the interval timer, what you can do too with this for more precise scheduling is you could pair it with a TT104B program timer to actually put in the dates, the times, the specifics of when you want those announcements or those messages or those tones to actually happen. Moving on now to the EV700. EV700 is kind of the big brother to the EV20R, and what it allows you to do, it actually works in a slightly different manner from the EV20R. It works more in a WAV file-based type of format, so what you would do with the EV700 is you would build your messages together based on those WAV files, and it's ideal for large retail stores, shopping malls, factories, bus depots, airports, railway lines, things of that nature. And the idea there is that you would build your WAV files together to make your messages. So say, for instance, if you were at a bus depot, you might say bus number is arriving, is departing from a certain gate. So you can make those announcements and program them at certain times with the program timer that's included with the EV700 through the software to dictate when those announcements are actually going to happen. Those, of course, can be triggered via contact closure on the back as well. You have 16 contact closures on the back, so in direct mode through the contacts, you can trigger up to 16 messages, but through the software or in binary mode on the same contacts, you can do up to 256 messages. So you've got quite a large capacity for the number of messages you can do. Also a very, very large capacity for the amount of WAV files that you can build into it. You can hold up to 32,768 WAV files to build together to make your messages go out. Very good quality as well in terms of the sound quality, as this samples at either 32K or 44K. And you do have automatic gain control on this as well, so that you can make sure your level is coming out appropriately for your requirement. Next, we'll have a look at the NX100 network audio adapter. This would be something you might use in a scenario where you would need to transmit audio from one remote location to another. So say, for instance, it's ideal for chains or franchises where you might use an audio source in a central location and transmit that out to your branches, or where audio needs, like I said, anywhere between that audio needs to be transmitted between 2 remote locations. This would be perfect to do that. It transmits in real time, high quality audio via your IP networks. So it can be over the internet, over your LAN. It reduces communications cost by allowing the internet to be used, so you're not having to necessarily have a dedicated source at each place. You can split it out from from one source, or save yourself the cost of going over phone lines or that sort of thing, or paying at each location to have an internet source feeding the branches, when you could just be doing that from one main source. It uses dedicated lines and internet transmission to remote areas. It's software driven, or you can control it through input terminals. It has 8 channels of contact inputs and outputs, which are provided on the back, or you can plug in with RS-232 to send serial data to and from remote areas as well. So that can go alongside the audio. Other useful tasks, you might use a broadcasting start sensor or a timer, and you can activate an external music source, selecting the broadcasting area for each of the input terminals. And like I said, there is far more online on the website and in previous webinars about the NX100 and how it works. So if you want more information on it, by all means, you can approach our tech support or look online for further details in the specifications and brochures that are online. Excellent audio signal quality. It maintains high fidelity over the wide range, right up from 50 hertz all the way to 14K. And you can adjust the frequency transmission rates based on what your transmission frequency range actually is, so that you've got the appropriate sampling for your transmission. It simultaneously transmits audio up to a maximum of 4 locations in unicast mode, and you can go up to 64 locations in multicast mode. So lots of different ways that you can use this to transmit audio from one place to another through a LAN connection or through the internet. A quick look at how this might wire. As you can see, you've got your sources being compiled into the NX100 adapter, and then that gets routed in through the LAN port into a router, then over a dedicated line or over the internet to the receiving router, and then back through the LAN into the network audio adapter on the other end to take the signal and output it into the main system at the branch office. Another thing a lot of people will forget about when it comes to background music systems is the fact that they're not always going to be dealing with a room that is always at the same exact level of ambient noise. So, for instance, say in a restaurant, your ambient noise level is going to be changing throughout the day. It might be louder at night when more people are coming into the pub side and things like that. So you need to be able to control your ambient noise, well, not so much the ambient noise, but the volume level of your system in conjunction with the levels of the ambient noise. So what this will allow you to do is automatically detect the ambient noise levels in the space and adjust the system's gain levels to be appropriate, so that everybody will get an intelligible sound no matter what the actual ambient noise level is in the space. So this is ideal anywhere that ambient noise levels fluctuate, affecting the intelligibility of the audio, so that you can make sure that your message, your audio, is getting through the way that it's supposed to, rather than getting drowned out by the amount of noise in the space. It allows for automatic and accurate input and output sound level adjustments, and that allows the background music to be broadcast at an appropriate level, regardless of the ambient noise in the venue. So that it's always going to be at the right level for you and everybody can hear it. Now the ambient noise function actually can distinguish its own output from the ambient noise in the room. So it'll tell whether the sound it's hearing is actually a looped back sound from its own output, or whether that's actually ambient noise, so that it doesn't detect itself as noise and therefore reduce its own levels. So it can do that for you, and you don't have to worry about the noise controller causing its own loop back and detecting itself as noise and therefore cutting out your system. It has 2 audio inputs, 2 outputs, one ambient noise sensor microphone input, which is a requirement. Of course, you do have to have a microphone in order to sense the actual ambient noise in the space, and that would be the AN9000. And there's also a monitor output that you can use for monitoring, obviously, for the ambient noise controller there. So you can tell exactly what it's doing at any given time, independent from the rest of the system. And of course, settings are easily done from the front panel of this unit. And there's a small picture there as well of the AN9000 ambient noise microphone that you would require for use with the DPL2 ambient noise controller. Okay, so that kind of takes care of some of the input options that you might use, and that leads us into some speakers that you could possibly use in your background music system, and that will depend, of course, entirely on what your venue is, what you're trying to do with it, what kind of an image you are trying to portray. So we'll start with some of the basics. Looking at the PC580 is our most basic ceiling mount speaker, of course, designed mainly for paging applications, but also can be used in background music scenarios. And we also have RBS series wall boxes. Similar idea, just the most basic of boxes to take paging and background music signals for very smaller, perhaps not as system critical type of installations. Then if you wanted to go, you need to go into something that is going to be more concentrated on background music and more concerned with the tonality of the system and the clarity of the music. You might want to go into something more like an F-Series ceiling speaker here below, which will give you a wider dispersion and better, more clear audio for music. And similar with the F-Series wall boxes, which would be a step up in terms of the quality of music that you might get out of there for your basic wall mount applications. Moving on, we see our pendant mount speakers. These are very hardy pendant mount speakers, and the idea behind them is, of course, in an open ceiling application like many new restaurants and things of that nature are, factories and that, these can hang just with aircraft cable and set at basically any height that you need them to. So if you have a space that has a very high ceiling, you can move the speaker a little bit closer to the ear so that you aren't bouncing it around the whole space. And of course, they're a very elegant looking unit designed similarly to a lot of light fixtures to be non-intrusive in your open ceiling restaurant type applications and things of that nature. We also have our projection speakers, which will allow a very flexible speaker direction and, again, very non-intrusive in their look and style. Similar idea with the H-Series interior design speakers. Typical idea there is that these are a surface mount type of speaker. Again, it's a step up in terms of audio quality as well from your basic wall boxes. But the idea here is that these are a very elegant looking speaker and very non-intrusive, kind of not your typical basic speaker box that might stick out on the wall a little bit. So these will blend into the background a little bit more, maybe make a more elegant look for your system in a higher, more aesthetically sensitive type application. Next, we have our CS series wide range paging horns. They come from the paging horn side of things, but these aren't just your basic tin horn paging can. These do allow for a fairly wide range of frequency response, so that they are appropriate for doing music and tone signaling, as well as high efficiency voice paging. And they are you do have the option for weatherproof polyurethane construction, and they are impact proof as well. So very hardy for your outdoor application. So if you need an outdoor zone that needs to run 24/7, 365, that would be the unit you might use for that, the speaker you might use for that. For your more high reverberant spaces, we have our line array type H type speakers. These are your narrow array type speakers, and the idea behind these is that these are going to put your sound only where it really needs to be, rather than again, splattering it in every which direction. What you have here is a wide horizontal pattern, but a narrow vertical pattern to limit the sound going up and down in places where it doesn't really need to be. Like you don't, for instance, need to be sending the audio right up into the ceiling necessarily, where it can bounce back and cause reverb issues. These are ideal for large environments prone to high levels of reverberation. So the idea there is to get the audio source directly to the ear rather than bouncing it around the space. You can also look at our coaxial line array speakers, which are more as close as it gets, I suppose, to a point source speaker box, but they do have a tweeter array in here, so they still are more designed for high intelligibility and an attractive design. Available in a 12-inch and 15-inch version in the HS 1500 and HS 1200 models. So there's a couple of options there, and those can be also used as you can see, there's an angled side on there. So if you are using these as monitors, you can do that. Of course, that's a little outside of what you would do with a background music space. Then in larger venues, maybe you're looking in a auditorium or something of that nature. Again, really large spaces with reverberation as an issue. You might use our HX5 series compact array, or if you need to go into an even bigger system than that, you can look at our HX7 series, which isn't on this list, but the HX either one will do a fantastic job in larger spaces such as arenas or auditoriums and things of that nature. And these are variable dispersion. It's just by physically adjusting the brackets on the back of them that you can adjust the angles. And on the HX5, you've got options of 15 degrees, 30, 45, or 60 degrees. The HX7, you have one other option where you can just beam it out at basically 0 degrees for a long throw. If you've got a long space that isn't very high, you can do you can send the audio basically directly from the speaker to the sound to the audience at a fairly extended distance. Now, those will, of course, both the HX5 and the HX7 have subwoofers that are intended to be used with them. You don't have to if you don't want to use a subwoofer, or you don't need a subwoofer in your system, but the idea is, a full, complete system that you might actually require those. So for the HX5, what you have is the FB120, which is a high-powered 12-inch sub, and then not listed here for the HX7 would be the FB150 subwoofer for even higher power and lower frequency range there. So that was the general look at some ways that you can design a full, complete background music system. Of course, we were centered around the A5000, the MA-725F, and the BG2240D for this particular webinar. As mentioned, though, do not forget that there are many, many ways to skin the cat. So if one of those does not suit your application 100%, I'm absolutely certain that one way or the other, we can provide you a solution that does. So in summary, the background systems are essential in creating the desired ambience for almost any venue. And they offer patrons a relaxed environment to put them at ease and motivate them to stay a little longer and purchase a little more. They also play a role in broadcasting information and can provide advertising or emergency messages that have pre-recorded content relayed at the appropriate times, whether that's via a program timer for actual scheduling or just an inbuilt repeater on a message timer on a message repeater. And in ultimate conclusion, TOA can provide a solution based on the requirements of the facility in question, including but not limited to the BG 2000 series, the MA series, and the A5000 series, as I mentioned. There are many, many ways to do these things, but I wanted to concentrate today on specifically the 3 newest models. But we can, one way or the other, design and build a complete, effective background music system for almost any application.